Report from Santa Fe is made possible in part by a grant from New Mexico Tech on the frontier of science and engineering education for bachelor's, master's, and PhD degrees. New Mexico Tech is the college you've been looking for. 1-800-428-TECH.
I'm Lorene Mills, and welcome to Report from Santa Fe. Our guest today is Ed Asner, actor extraordinaire, political activist, man of courage. Welcome to New Mexico.
Raconteur.
Raconteur.
Debonair.
Oh.
All them French words.
Yes, yes.
And when we became alienated with France, I don't know how the hell we could have used those words still about me.
I don't know. Je ne sais quoi.
Perhaps you could call me freedom lover extraordinary, something like that.
I will call you many things, but I'm going to let you tell us a little about your background. What I am so astonished at is that you have won 7 Emmys, 5 Golden Globes. You played Lou Grant on television, and for a lot of people, the years you were on, first playing the character of Lou Grant with Mary Tyler Moore on the Mary Tyler Moore Show, and then your own show called The Lou Grant Show, which ran for how many years?
5 years.
5 years. And you got Emmy after Emmy for that.
5 of them.
Yeah. You were also the president of the Screen Actors Guild during some very turbulent times. You've also written books. You have been a political activist of great courage. And now you are with us in Santa Fe, so a very warm welcome.
Thank you. That's a very nice intro. I can't top it, so should I go home now?
No, because what I have to ask you, they always say I'm not a doctor, but I played one on TV. Well,
I'm not an actor, but I play one on TV.
Yeah, but you played a man of the press. You played a newspaper editor and a radio person. So I would love to ask you, from that vantage point, from your years of experience, what do you think about the role of the press these days?
Well, I think it's horrible. Yeah, I think that a good place to start would be just observing the vaunted liberal New York Times in its coverage of the election, in its being a poop sheet for the White House in the run-up to the invasion of Iraq. And I don't know that others were much better. Sometimes one of the Miami papers, I think, surfaced with good stuff, or maybe one of the press syndicates in the West may have come through. But in the main, if you follow the New York Times, it was god-awful. And Judith Miller is the perfect example of the New York Times, and we, thank God, saw what happened to her. So the press has not, as somebody a long time ago said to me, those people in the press who are in the loop, they do a fantastic job of really letting you know what they got from being in the loop. But then they cannot blow the whistle on the people they cover in that loop because they'll alienate their sources and be out on their ass. So everybody gets indebted to everybody else and is never an independent journalist.
Amy Goodman of Democracy Now! Wrote a book with that title called Access of Evil, because these press people have access to the powers that be, and they will not do anything to jeopardize that privileged access.
Watergate, what's his name?
Nixon.
No, the 2 reporters.
Woodward and Bernstein,
yeah.
Of course.
And Woodward is a pretty good example of one of those who uses the president and writes of him and writes of the inner workings of the White House, but could go much further.
Right. We want to talk about the broader situation in politics now. Fear-mongering is a word that's used a lot.
Terror.
Terror, oh yes, yes.
It scares the hell out of me.
Yes, but it was ratcheted up right after the 5th anniversary of 9/11. And it's like, have they stayed too long at the dance with this? The administration is using this again and again and again to scare people.
Oh, of course. And the people get scared. I mean, he has ratings which he doesn't deserve, primarily because they think Mr. Standing Tall in the Saddle is keeping our borders clear and clean. Even before this war on terror, I tended to think that in this country, anytime they declared war on something other than an actual physical entity as a nation, etc., war on drugs, war on poverty, war on terror, that automatically stated that it was doomed to failure. And I think the war on terror is doomed to failure. I think it's laughable. War on poverty certainly was laughable. War on drugs is laughable. And we have a benighted approach, I think, to attacking this so-called enemy. And as soon as they use the word war, our people become alerted. You call a war on terror. How can you ever sign an armistice when the war on terror is concluded? And how will we know it's concluded?
Well, it's like squishing mercury.
Yeah.
There's no definition, there's no defined opponent. But let's go back to not just war.
One last thing.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a good way to acclimate our citizens to a state of war so that we never expect to be in a state of peace.
Well, let's go back to the war, not just the war on X, Y, and Z, but the actual war that we're conducting now in Iraq and doing some saber rattling about Iran.
Let's not forget Afghanistan.
No, let's not. It's, I think we've got 1/7 of the troops there that we have in the other, so it's really not a high priority. And yet that's where bin Laden was, that's where the training camps were. And now the Taliban and the Afghanis have produced such a bumper crop of opium. It's like 30% more than there are users in the world, so they have to go start getting people hooked on heroin, and I mean, it's
Correct me if
appalling.
I'm wrong, but when the Taliban ruled unchallenged, I thought that they had eliminated greatly the growing of opium in Afghanistan.
They had reduced it, but it still was such a major part of the economy that they couldn't get rid of it. But they did frown on it, but they frowned on large Buddhist sculptures, you know, arch treasures. They frowned on women. You know, it was clearly it was a regime in need of change. But again, look what we've done 5 years later. What do we have to show for it? So you have been, you're here in Santa Fe, and you have been the main actor in a reading of a play by a brilliant playwright here named Craig Barnes. It's called A Nation Divided, and you played to packed houses. Can you tell us a little about the play?
Well, it deals about an old man, and would you believe it? I don't even need makeup. That's shocking, shocking. An old man who brings a suit. I don't know the exact legal terms. Craig should be here to prompt me. Against the three main boyos of this administration: President, Vice President, and Secretary of Defense. And presents his case in some fictional court, presents his case against these three lawyers for the culprits. And it's not, other than the last clincher in which a certain paper is introduced called the Black Gold Exhibit. We know all of these things. We can enumerate them, provided we're comfortable and are allowed to think all of the crimes and commissions, the lies that this administration has performed. What this play does in countering the argument of the old man about the lies and about the commissions, and their excuses are that they were not under oath, they were saying it this way, they were saying it that, or they were mistaken, they weren't sure. When he consistently tries to drive home the fact that while speaking out of this side of his mouth, he in private was talking out of this side of his mouth, and showing the conflict in the truth as it existed by the eventual fallout of the invasion, etc. Telling Saddam Hussein, bring your weapons out to the parking lot. And there were no weapons. Show us that you have, submitting 12,000 pages of information, the introduction of people in his own regime who testified. His foreign minister was actually, I think it was the foreign minister, turned by the CIA and said that none of these things existed. but we went to war in spite of it. Mushroom clouds, the sulfur from Niger, all lies which they refused to let the public be informed about.
And the play is called A Nation Deceived, and I know we'll be seeing more of it. And I found your particular role as the old country lawyer particularly compelling.
Thank you.
But you've done a lot of things. I was reading an article that said that no one in Hollywood has the history of activism and the courage that you have. And
Let's not go into that.
we won't go into that, but I want to just point out the breadth of some of the projects you've been involved in, one of which is a favorite of mine, Project Heifer, which is, you want to sum it
It's
up?
certainly non-political, but it's
totally
based on the
non-political.
idea of rather than give a man a fish, teach him how to grow fish or to catch fish. And it's grown immeasurably in the recent years, and it's about as Christian
Yes, yeah.
an organization as you can find, although it doesn't lay down any cardinal principles as to who's getting those animals.
So that a citizen...
You can give them as Christmas gifts. That's the wonderful thing.
You can give a pair of chickens as Christmas gifts.
That's right.
You can give sheep, you can give goats. And there are stories now, and it's not like, it's so apolitical, it's beautiful. People are hungry and you give them a means to have food.
Yeah.
And so as a donation, you can give, say, a heifer, you can give a cow to a village or to a family.
An
or
ox,
an ox.
a water buffalo, of course, is a fantastic gift.
Yes, yes, yes. So, and how does that look as a tax deduction? One water buffalo. Another project.
Watch out for the horns.
Yes, yes. Another project that is very near and dear to my heart is the California Clean Money election campaign reform.
My wife is intensively occupied on that. And of course, the main thing you have to fight there are the politicians who try to, yeah, we're for you. And we'll probably lose it. The California Nurses Association is instrumental in pushing it. The Clean Money campaign certainly has been there for a number of years, and that's when I got involved, and subsequently my wife, and she's become an unbelievable strong force in fighting for it. And the success in Arizona of the Clean Money campaign, the success in Maine, and with the horrible appreciation that the public has of Congress, according to this latest poll.
77% disapprove of the job that Congress is doing.
And yet, how many say that they
like their own congressman?
Yeah, sure. But if this we've also got a good medical plan being submitted to the electorate in fall. So
in California.
In California, yeah. If the people, it's always the people, if the people just look at it, look at who's for it and the arguments for it, look at the arguments against it, and if the people don't proselytize once they come down for one side or the other, then the people show themselves to be worthless.
Well, the people have a brain, and the people are battered between the eyes by these television commercials all through the election season.
I know.
And the
Clean money
millions,
would help change that too.
I know, that's where I'm going. We have one race in our state that uses campaign finance reform, which is the Public Regulation Commission. So everyone's watching that to see how it goes. But to have, I understand that there's over $1 billion, well no, 500 million to two of our stations on just one of our big congressional races. What we could do in our little poor state with that kind of money instead of it going into the pockets of the mass media outlets.
Yeah.
So I think the people, first of all, they're just clicking right through them. They cannot bear to hear these anymore. I think they're finally saying there must be another way. How do we get this back into a more democratic, in the old sense of the word, where an individual, my vote counts as much as a special interest with $500,000. So, and Bill Moyers is one of the kind of pioneers of that movement, isn't he?
The American Saint?
Yes, and my personal guru, yeah.
I think that if we can ever get people to think in terms of clean money, to ignore the grandiose commercials, I mean, we're looking at Schwarzenegger and Angelides in California. And of course, Schwarzenegger's going to have beaucoup, using one of those French words of mine, beaucoup money to push his campaign. Of course, he's been playing it very cagily, very craftily in the last year since he lost his last election against the propositions.
Did
that
he
was
ever?
I'm surprised he could get off the floor. But he's done a good job of doing that for himself. And after we wipe out this money disproportion, then maybe we can start dealing with lobbyists.
Ah, special interests and lobbyists. Yes. Yes, but I want to go back, since you mentioned Schwarzenegger, and the accusation always is that what are these celebrities doing in politics? And what do you think? So there are not many Republican celebrities. Arnold is one of them, Governor Schwarzenegger. And
Reagan was.
oh, Reagan was certainly the grandfather of all celebrity politicians. What do you think the role, how hard is it? You early on, you came in just after the McCarthy era, and you have fought. You had a situation with CBS when you worked for the medical aid group in El Salvador, which was, what a benign, what a lovely thing to do, and you felt that that had affected your show.
Oh, sure.
Cancellation.
Yeah. I became politically undesirable.
And so now there are other celebrities still carrying the banner. How dangerous is that these days? What would you tell a passionately committed celebrity about the risks and the benefits of going to the wall for their beliefs?
When I kept my mouth shut for a long time because I was saying, no, I'm not strong enough yet to. And when I finally did take a step, it was, in my opinion, a humanist step, medical aid for El Salvador, but it became a cause célèbre, and I became a communist in the eyes of my detractors. So to those people who, even though they may think they're taking a humanistic stand when they take it, be prepared for it being massacred and smeared, and it's hard to make somebody a communist these days, but perhaps they'll try to show you that you're connected to terrorists.
Yes, that's the thing.
Yeah.
You're not patriotic.
That's right. That's always a big patriotic thing. The best example I can use is that when I was, to be brief, somewhat blacklisted after the El Salvador occurrence. I gave an interview in Washington in which I said that when a blacklist occurs of any stripe, the people in show business, it doesn't matter whether they're conservatives or Republicans, I'm sorry, conservatives, liberals or conservatives, they will fear about their own special babies, the producer, the director, about their projects. So to cast somebody who at that moment is politically controversial, even though he's clean as the driven snow.
And perfect for the part.
But in the papers, in that media you mentioned earlier, he becomes branded, then they will say, as I said in this interview, they can't let their conscience say, no, I wouldn't touch him, he's a commie. They will say, no, I think he's too fat. I think he's too, I think he's too bald. I think he's too gray. And one casting director who I did favors for and never did anything for me told my agent, I think he's overexposed. So the blacklist is perpetuated by the weak need of the fact that it's a business. This is why many blacklisted actors during the intensive blacklist of the 40s and 50s went and did Broadway or fled to Europe, where they were able to and allowed to work.
Well, is it a myth that Hollywood is liberal? Isn't it more, since it's so bottom line business oriented, isn't it actually more conservative?
Well, I know, I would not say, let me put it this way. At the height of World War II, when there were war movies being made, Allied movies being made, the 10 screenwriters who were hauled in to on the grounds of being communists and refused to testify or to give name names. If you were to look at the movies they wrote during the war, I mean, there is no communism underlying those movies. It's what we as all we as Americans believe, the good life, the democratic life. They preached democracy just like anybody else. So they didn't infiltrate your brain with their writing. Even if they had wanted to, they probably couldn't have. I mean, to preach communism, you're gonna, the masses will take over. You never had that. You never had that. And if it was used, then it was the people will decide. That's fine. The constant, the actual. Your question was, isn't Hollywood more conservative?
Well,
No,
I
think the talent, for the most part, the actors, most of the directors, most of the writers, are probably progressive in their approach. But when they write, only if it's a special target that's approved by the network or the cable operator, then they may be allowed to attack a special target that so corrupt that it needs to be attacked. The cigarette movie was one very good example of that, which would have received approval throughout the country and did.
You're talking about the movie about Jeffrey Wigand, the whistleblower.
Yeah.
And the name just escapes. Insider, was it that? The name escapes me, but it was.
The Informant. Was it the? I can't remember.
Yeah, but it was based on some CBS work, 60 Minutes work that was done and then retracted. That did the cigarette executives know what was in their cigarettes, and the whistleblower who came forth about that.
Well, I, for one, am waiting for the inside story to be told on 9/11, because I think the commission did a horrible job and whitewashed what should not have been whitewashed. No heads rolled from the 9/11 Commission report, and I think that is ghastly, because I think I mean if those national entities, air traffic control, air defense, the cover-up of asbestos in the air during the cleanup, from which perhaps 40,000 people suffered perhaps terminal diseases. I think it's ghastly and horrible, and I just wonder how long before some right-thinking government comes into being that wants to clean up I mean, for one of the heads of that commission, Kane, to then participate as advisor in the ABC movie, which committed such travesties in its presentation, and he thought it was a very good job. So I think that shows you where we're coming from with that man as one of the heads.
And they did modify it somewhat, even up to the day of airing, but they did not modify the international version. So all over the world, things that Clinton, Madeleine Albright, Sandy Berger said were absolutely true. This did not happen. That got perpetuated, which, is again back to the role of media and who's minding the store. Yeah. But I have to ask you something. Speaking of mass media, The Tonight Show has a segment now called "Does This Impress Ed Asner?" So, what does impress you?
Well, honesty certainly does.
Honesty?
Beauty, of course. What does impress me? That's a farce. I mean, we're doing a farce there. None of it impresses me except the agility of some of the contestants, and sometimes they're charming. What does impress me? Very little these days, because what impresses me actually is the enormity of the crimes of this administration. What impresses me is the media's inability, or even if they did try, the suspension of disbelief by the public at large. That's what amazes me and impresses me. I stand there aghast, and it's like the 6 blind men investigating the elephant, and identifying, the one identifying with the leg and saying what it is, the other with the trunk, another with the tail, and refusing to take into countenance the rest of the elephant.
So what you are looking for, as am I, is a visionary leader who gets the whole picture of the entire elephant and who's got the integrity and the charisma to transmit that vision.
I don't expect that to happen because we're always disappointed. They always have concrete boots of some sort or another, that, and not the shining white boots we want to see on our hero. We cannot wait, and we're so sorely tempted for the knight in shining armor. We must try to fight against that image. We must find the bumbling fool who says at least 75% of what we want. That's a lot to ask for. But then to work assiduously and profess his honesty and his truth in that 75% to the world, so that he has the support of the body of the people. We are not going to get everything we want, but we have to work for the best there is, and then use that as a base and try to work upward from there.
And if not the knight in shining armor, perhaps a whole battalion of serfs, the people of America, who say, wait a minute, I remember the Constitution, I remember balance of power, I remember the Declaration of Independence, and hold that vision.
Well, like to quote the end of the play, where the reporter is saying that she talked to the old man, and she said, "What do you think?" And I said, "Well," the old man says, "Let the people rest, Your Honor." And then he says, "I was wrong. The people will never rest." And if I could have that feeling that the people will never rest, that's why this play gives me courage. If I can take that seedling and hope that it will take effect in the people, then I will be a very happy man.
Well, I'm a very happy person because you have joined us today. Our guest today is Ed Asner, who is an actor for many, many years, 7 Emmys, 5 Golden Globes. You continue to do voiceovers. You were even the Santa in Elf with Will Ferrell. Yeah. So thank you for joining us today on Report from Santa Fe.
You're lovely to be with. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank you, our viewers, for joining us today. I'm Lorene Mills. This is Report from Santa Fe, and we'll see you next week.
Report from Santa Fe is made possible in part by a grant from New Mexico Tech, on the frontier of science and engineering education for bachelor's, master's, and PhD degrees. New Mexico Tech is the college you've been looking for. 1-800-428-TECH.